Good evening, Goodman Games Universe, and thank you for joining us on another episode of Rules as Written, or Raw. My name is Matt Robertson, also known as Grape Ape.
And howdy, folks. I'm Stefan. Go by DM Bad Wrong Fun on a few parts of the internet.
And you will recognize we have a very favored guest of ours with us again. Thank you for joining us. The governor of guidelines, the head honcho of the hegemony of rules, the Sun Tzu of stipulations, as with us always, the amazing Bob Brinkman. How are you today, Bob?
Wow. Okay. With that introduction, I'll re-up my contract for another 3 appearances. I'm doing good. I'm doing good. A little frazzled, but I'm doing good.
Quiz at the end of this show, like next year, is going to be what are all the names titles I gave to Bob as a rules adjudicator.
That'll be an hour
Yeah.
long.
Yeah, when we do, Raw Jeopardy, that'll be one of the, boxes.
All right, well, let's get right into it. We have sent Bob the questions and handouts from episodes 9, 10, and 11, and we got a couple new questions for him. But we're going to start out, as always, reviewing the questions from the episode with Brendan LaSalle. Stefan, you want to take it away?
Yeah, so the first one we asked on there is when using the dice chain and attacking with a die higher than a d20, what are the rolls that will be critical rolls?
Well, rules as written. It's if you crit on a 20 and you're on a d24, it's going to be a 24. If you crit on a 19 through 20, it'll be a 23, 24, but 23 is not an automatic hit.
Yeah, and I think that's the conclusion we came to as well.
Yeah, I think we all enjoyed some house rules, but the book is really clear about that. If you want to do rules as written,
and that's the thing, right? So house rules, I think that's one of the things that a house rule is kind of important for, because okay, I now have a slightly better chance to hit, but I have a much lesser chance of scoring a critical success. And the first time I was bumped up to a D24, I was like, wait, but now I would rather have the smaller roll and have a better chance to a crit than the D24. So I could certainly see why people would house rule that one.
How do you feel about the Wilson rule, Bob?
The Wilson rule is an interesting way to house rule it if you want to keep some sort of expansion in there. I don't know. I haven't house ruled it at my tables, but as a player, I would like to see it house ruled. How about that? So if I'm playing, I would love to have that. But then again, if I were to use that rule as a judge and gave it to the monsters, if they were a die up, that's not good for the players in the long run. So because criticals will always favor the monsters in the long run.
All right, and I think the next question we had a little back and forth on, Stefan.
We sure did. It was how do you define infravision and what can and can't you see with it?
Yes, and I've used both sides of the arguments that you brought up. I'm generally it's heat vision, it's infravision, and so maybe you can't see undead, maybe you can't see things that are room temperature. But before coming on the show, I decided to do a little bit of digging, so that I wouldn't come off as a complete idiot. And I sent a graphic to you folks and to Elena. And it is an image from National Geographic. They did a video with comparing a regular camera to an infrared camera. And the particular image is a woman holding flowers. And you can see that while, yes, she is much warmer, it's not that everything room temperature is invisible. There's still outlines. You can still see things. You're not going to be able to see color. Well, you're not going to be able to make out distinct colors of other things because you're seeing heat imagery. But and I might, if like undead are sort of lying in wait, I might have a check to be able to notice them, but they're not invisible.
I do really like that image, and it's hard to argue with National Geographic.
Right.
But I like the explanation of it and seeing the visual of it. So you can see in the dark somewhat, but that's just kind of like shapes. Then anything with a heat signature is going to kind of radiate a lot more brilliant than
And
just the normal background.
There was something else, but I didn't send it because I would have had to do a video clip, and I have a gray beard, and sending video clips is just beyond me at this point. But it was someone in infrared walking barefoot across the floor, because people are like, well, if I can see heat signatures, I want to track people. And it showed how quickly things like that fade away, unlike in Predator, where tracks are like 20, 30 minutes later, they're still there. They fade pretty quickly. Although I would certainly, in a case of pursuit through a dark area, I would give characters with infravision an opportunity to try and track something based on heat.
Was it just like a few seconds and
Yeah,
it's gone?
it was just like, oh, it was maybe as many as like 5 to 8 seconds before it was fully faded away. So if you're pursuing someone or following someone closely, it actually should work.
But was the video of it was probably bare feet touching the
Yes,
ground.
it
So
was.
if you're
It was
pursuing someone with boots, no
you're not going
chance
to be able to
probably.
chase that warrior, but that band of goblins in their knobby little bare feet, different story.
Well, looking at the picture, Bob, would you? I mean, is that really considered grayscale? Because it looks really dark. When I think of grayscale and I have an image of it in my head, it's like I'm seeing no color at all. That it's just kind of gray, but shadowed and shady. But looking at the image, it's pretty dark. It's like almost a purplish, blackish darkness.
Right. Well, and the fact of the matter is that neither true grayscale or what you're seeing would be truly representative of something seeing in the infrared spectrum, because those are different colors and different wavelengths. But so I think that one is a fairly good representation. It probably, if you wanted to go grayscale, it would just be matters of brightness, right? So the yellow being much brighter than what's orange or what's red instead. But you can still make out shapes. If you look really closely, you can make out detail. You're probably not going to read the newspaper.
I don't remember how I ruled on that one, Stefan. I don't remember if I said grayscale and you said you were
saying you were saying dark vision, and I kept on just saying it's like the Predator.
I think I'm gonna have to change my ruling after the imagery that has been presented.
Well, and the other confusion I think comes from we've all played other systems, and back in the day there was infravision and there was ultravision, and ultravision really was just straight black and white, sort of like night sight. So I think that's where my brain's image of dark vision versus infravision comes from.
All right. Well, the next question we have, there was even some more discussion about it earlier this week. Because we'll let Stefan ask the question first.
Yeah. It was one that I think we were all just saying, look at this page in the book. There's a lot of examples, but it was when a cleric's using turn unholy, what constitutes an unholy creature?
Yes, and if I recall, you looked at an example that was like you can turn, or I'm trying to remember what it was, because it mentioned, oh, you were using detect evil as an example, and that's where I think you kind of stumbled, because you put things of ill intent, you rolled that in with unholy, and it's literally separated with a comma. Things unholy are the things that are unholy to your faith. It's not turn evil, it's turn unholy.
So the kind of questions that came up this week, Bob, in the Dungeon Crawler server, was the neutral clerics can turn mundane animals. Why would mundane animals be unholy to neutrality?
I think I would have to look at, because individual animals aren't always neutral. Some animals are considered lawful, some are considered chaotic, and so I would allow them to turn those, but not necessarily the neutral. If I really wanted to stretch to find an excuse for that, I would have to go outside DCC. There was a Dragon Magazine article years ago that was the paladins of every alignment, back before paladins could be of any alignment. and there were two paladins for neutrality: the Keeper of the Balance and the Destroyer of the Balance, because they worked in opposition. So I suppose you could kind of go that route. It might be more intended to represent a druid, and a druid having some sort of control over animals in general, and lumping them as unholy because they want them to be able to turn animals.
I think it is the druidic link from. There's a really good article that was just blog post. I forget who it was by, but it was on the what's the podcast that it reads like blogs on tape. There's one about druids, and I remember a big segment of that article was that a druid has control over, some animals of the forest. It knows their ways, but a druid hates dogs because a dog is a domesticated wolf. You've brought civilization and made something unnatural, because a dog should just be a wolf, but it's been made into something else. So that would probably be a good way to say,
I like that. I like that a lot.
The consensus I came up with, my excuse was, well, chaotic, clerics can oppose neutrality or oppose lawful clerics, and lawful clerics can turn unholy or chaotic. So they had to give neutral something, so they gave them the animals. So that was my excuse.
Well, that, and I mean, while the term unholy is used both as flavor text and a mechanic, the stuff that's on the list is purely a mechanic. So you can sort of ignore the flavor usage of the word unholy in that aspect.
So chaotic clerics, they kind of get the short end of the stick on that one a little bit. The lawful can turn undead, demons, and monsters, and the neutral clerics can turn mundane creatures and undead and demons and monsters. And the chaotic clerics, they only get like angels, paladins, lawful dragons.
I pointed it out on there too. They're going to be able to turn in a city-based campaign. They're going to shine greater, I think, because you're going to be able to turn the members of order, the grain merchants, the town guard. You're going to be able to turn unholy on the king.
I want to point out the first time that your lawful warrior who's earned his spears in one of the martial orders encounters a chaotic cleric who turns him. That warrior will probably not think that the cleric got the short end of the stick.
Well, and the last one is law-aligned humanoids. So that would, be goblins, orcs, kobolds, bugbears, maybe. Any monster with like a hierarchy structure. Is that correct?
That sounds right. So I mean, and that provides quite a few options as well. I mean, now if you want to have fun and house rule it, rather than letting chaotic clerics turn undead, for one of the projects that I'm currently working on, there are clerics that have the ability to command undead, and so they can bring them under their sway. They can bolster their power. So you can always, I mean, if you want to house rule things, and remember, of course, the monsters and villains don't have to follow the rules. That's oddly in the rules. So you can have a lot of fun either way.
Even that, just going off that gave me an idea. If you could have the the undead monsters or demons automatically tend to go toward the lawful characters and just pass right by a chaotic cleric.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, if I'm a big demon of chaos and there's a chaotic cleric over there who might be opposing me, but he's not a bad guy, he's just misguided. And there's that lawful wizard or that lawful warrior over there. I'm going to smoke those two, and then I'll have a conversation with them.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. Well, we got one more question from Brendan's episode.
Yep, and it was during a player's action, can they split up their movement? Move 15 feet, attack, and then move their other 15 feet.
Yeah.
So I'm leaning forward on this one, Bob. I'm waiting to hear your answer.
Technically speaking, all of the examples given are no, they cannot. And the thing, I think something to consider is while we stop to think, okay, well, I have 2 actions and I can move, so technically I can triple move, but you're still doing all of that in an incredibly quick amount of time. And so the idea of I'm going to run 15 feet, stop, do something else, and then run 15 more feet isn't really feasible for splitting movement. But rules as written, you can't. Now, I kind of agree with Brendan that I would allow like a mighty deed for charging by, or especially or if you're mounted, right? I mean, I'm not moving. My horse is, and my horse can do whatever the hell it wants, and I can just swing as we go by.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get your official answers here. Raw rules as written answers. When using the dice chain, attacking on a dice higher than a d20, what would be the rules that would be critical hits?
It's the top numbers.
All right. How is infravision defined? What can you see and what can't you see with it?
Well, you can see heat signatures, but being able to see heat signatures allows you to see a lot more than even I had originally anticipated.
All right. And when using the cleric ability turn unholy, what constitutes an unholy creature?
The things that are on the list of unholy creatures.
All right. And lastly, can you split up your movement, move, attack, and then finish moving?
No. Although you could move, attack, and use a separate movement if you have an additional action.
So the next episode we're going to go to is episode 10. And let me check my schedule here. I believe that was the episode with... Where is it? That was with Daniel Bishop,
Yes.
Ravencrow King. So our first question for that one, and Elena, I don't know if you got the handouts. I think I forgot to send you the zip files. But if you could bring up question 1 from episode 10. Are casters allowed to change out the spells they have prepared with other spells that they know?
So rules as written, they cannot. Matter of fact, I even once was present while Michael Curtis really went in on explaining no, as one of the people that was part of that rule creation. He trumps me. But no, it seems weird because if you look at the flavor text, you're always trying to collect more spells.
Right.
But there are ways within the rules to gain spells beyond your standard level limitations. So you can't swap them out. You just have to work harder to learn more.
All right. Do you know any of the ways to learn more spells without getting any more given slots?
There's a page. Give me a second. There's a page.
I'm gonna guess packs with demons and Ioun stones.
Is that the one that says quest for it?
There's a section in the judges portion of the book which describes like patron quests and things of that nature. You know, gaining power that is beyond what you can normally do, which is, you know, making a pact with a supernatural being and giving them something great. Sort of like if you look at, I believe it's I want to call it the undulating corruption or the crawling. Yeah, the undulating corruption. Where you're on a quest that can cure corruption, right? I mean, being able to get an additional spell beyond what your level maximum should be an adventure in and of itself, and that is pretty much what's talked about in the book. That, or, you know, make a deal with a patron.
Well, I think I ruled, Stefan, that I would let them change out spells upon level advancement. Hearing that Michael Curtis has said no, I'm gonna once again change my answer to no.
But that's not a bad house rule. It's really weird because it's that holdover of Vancian magic, right? I mean,
Right.
The idea that wizards, you know, have these massive spell books but know like 10 spells and they're the same spells. I can certainly see where that can sort of, it can be a bit of a drag sometimes. Although people should also remember that as you're leveling up, you know, if you have discovered a brand new really cool second level spell and you don't have a second level spell slot, but you've got a third and you really want that second level spell, I don't think any judge will tell you no.
Well, and you're pretty familiar with Dying Earth, Bob. The magician class, they can change out spells, right? Well, more familiar than we are.
Yeah. Oh man, that was a couple of years of my life. Yeah, they can, but it's because their mechanic works differently, right? They're doing rote magic where they are literally burning formulas into their brains,
Yeah.
and they're casting like once or burning so they can remember that spell and cast it a second time, as opposed to fire, repeat, fire, repeat, fire, repeat. And I think that's a big part of the trade-off.
So if you want to play a game where you can learn new spells that you got, find a Dying Earth game.
Well,
Uh,
and there's something else in Dying Earth that I think people are going to look at, and that's the way you can personalize spells. So just like there's Ecom's magical mask,
Mystical Mask.
mystical mask. There we are. You could have Matt's mystical mask. Could be a different version where you've changed out a couple of the different spell levels. So the stuff in Dying Earth is going to allow people to customize their spells a little bit more without having to have wholly different spells. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun.
Outstanding. All right. Well, our next question was: do bonus spells that are given by a patron count against the maximum number of known spells that an elf is able to cast?
Well, I'm pretty sure that Daniel ruled pretty solidly on this one. I'm going to agree. They don't count because you get them in place of a casting of Invoke Patron. So it's not a spell that you're casting repeatedly through the day, which is something that people can tend to overlook.
And Stefan, there was some kind of discussion about Invoke Patron on the Dungeon Crawler server or the Goodman Game server. I can't remember which one. About why they get the Invoke Patron spell right away. Do elves have a patron as soon as they're created?
They just know the foul rites. That's an elf does not actually have to have a patron. Was what I was saying on the forums. They just know how to ask.
They don't have to have a patron, but elves are from Elfland, right? There is a king, and the king is a patron. So I would say that because of that, they are familiar with those rights, because most elves would probably choose to ally themselves that way. And also remember, you can have multiple patrons. Patrons might not like it, and it may cause you some grief in the long run. But an elf sworn to the king of Elfland could also bind himself to Sezrekan.
Yeah, I think the question was if they hadn't picked a patron yet, why would they have that Invoke Patron spell already?
Well, because you get them both. When you have Patron Bond and Invoke Patron count as one spell, no matter who's got them.
I think something about the question too was also like, hey, is that a racial ability? What about level 0 elves? Wouldn't they get that along with their infravision? And folks were just like, no.
No, because
Don't complicate the funnel like that.
No, the book says they don't. But also you can't cast Invoke Patron until you have bonded with a patron.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose you could, but nothing's going to happen.
All right, well, our third question was, are elves able to use their enhanced senses at 0 level? For example, like check for secret doors. Do they have that sense at 0 level?
It does say in the book that dwarves get their inversion, elves get their senses. The things that are not learned abilities, right? They don't get Invoke Patron and Patron Bond because those are learned. But their eyes still function the same way. Their hearing is still sharp, and so the book does allow them to have those abilities.
All right, anything to say on that one, Stefan? I think that one was pretty clear. We hashed that one out.
I remember that being an easy one to get through.
I don't think we stumped Daniel at all either.
Well, and those elven abilities are important. People need to remember it's not just that walking past a secret door, a judge should be making a roll to see if they notice it. But if they're searching for secret doors, they get a +4 to their check. That's important for folks to remember.
Mm-hmm. I used to think it was like plus their elf level. If you're a level 1 elf, you get a +1, but no, it's flat +4.
Yeah, which would sort of make sense in if you're comparing it to like what I call the dwarf check, right? I'm sniffing for gold and stuff like that. Yeah.
So one of the house rules I like to employ with thieves and elves that I always forget, but I'm trying to get more in the habit, is like I'll have my thief roll 5 find trap rolls right at the beginning, and the elf roll 5 find secret door rolls. And then when that opportunity comes up, I'll say, roll me a d5, and then I'll pick one off the list of their already rolled rolls. So that way they won't get into the metagaming mindset like, oh, I rolled a 1, there's no trap there, or there's a trap. That way they don't know what the result is, but they still roll the result.
You could certainly do it that way. You can always just roll it yourself, or if you're going to have them roll, what I would do is in that case was I would have them make a roll, add their modifier to it, and then I would also make a roll, and I would take their d20 plus my d20, top it out, and roll it around. So if they've got a 6 and I roll a 10, well, now they've got a 16 plus their modifier. If they've got a 19 and I roll a 2, they're not finding anything.
That's a
And
good
if
call.
you want to keep things kind of on the fly like that, but I just prefer, especially since I'm running so much online stuff these days. If they're just walking by, I can just make a roll. Nobody really notices, which is good because players have a tendency to, well, he didn't find secret doors, so I want to search for secret doors. That's not the way.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's what I was trying to avoid. All right, our last question for that episode was how debilitating is the elf's vulnerability to iron? How often does it really come into play? Should it be expanded upon?
I again, I'm going to agree with Daniel that I don't think it's debilitating enough. I mean, it's a hit point per day, although at low levels, a hit point a day can kill you pretty quick. That really can make the difference between life and death when you're a 0 level and you've got 2 or 3 hit points, or
just one.
yeah, or just 1. I grabbed the ladder, you die. But yeah, it doesn't really go with the folklore, right? And it draws from the folklore a little bit, but it's not really heavy, right? It's not, iron can kill them, iron steals away their power, but I think it is enough that people playing elves take it to heart. You don't need to be pounding and piling damage on them when people playing elves are already, hey, no, that blade's not mithril. I'm not picking it up.
That's true.
Okay, well that's a steel battle axe, but it's got a big wooden haft. Okay, well I'm gonna wear gloves just in case, but it's got a wooden haft. I can use it. Things of that nature. Players have been really good about sticking to the spirit of it without needing to be punished.
I saw people talking on one of the Discord servers this week about it too, and saying, how bad is it? And I was just saying, hey, if you had a peanut allergy, a bad peanut allergy, maybe it wasn't going to kill you, but you're going to break out in terrible hives. Would you wear a peanut ring if you're still wearing gloves? Would you wear a bandolier of peanuts?
Well, and I think that's not only fair, but it's a realistic way to look at it. The 0 level elf grabbing a piece of iron could die. The 5th level elf carrying around a piece of iron isn't. But the player, much like the character, is so conditioned that they just don't mess with it.
I like it somewhere in between, like the kryptonite that debilitates Superman and the sunlight that shines on a vampire, and you see the smoke and the hiss of the skin. Somewhere in between there is where I like.
I'd love to see things like an elf being taken prisoner and wrapped in iron chains so that he can't cast spells and things of that nature. That really goes with the folklore. But as written, it is a hit point a day.
All right, well, let's get your final answers on these, Bob. Rules is written in the book, and as always, I always forget to mention this at the beginning of the show. We are using the DCC RPG 8th printing. There's a few of them out there, but we're using the 8th. Our caster's allowed to change out the spells they have prepared with other spells that they know. What's your final answer on that one, Bob?
No, they cannot.
All right. Do bonus spells that are given by a patron count against the maximum number of known spells that an elf is able to cast?
No. Just like for a wizard, they count against the number of times they can cast Invoke Patron during a day.
And so everybody usually brings up Purple Sorcerer because Purple Sorcerer adds that patron spell in there automatically, and they're like, well, how come my elf gets 5 spells when he's only allowed to have 3? That's the reason, because it's in place of Invoke Patron. Are elves able to use their enhanced senses at 0 level to check for secret doors?
Yes, they are.
And lastly, how debilitating is the elf's vulnerability to iron?
enough that it's sort of like touching a hot stove, right? You can do it once as a young elf, probably not going to do it.
All right. Our next episode, Stefan, was with Marzio.
All about and we made him talk all about halflings. And he was going, oh no, I know the least about halflings, but he did his homework.
On for that episode. He's all about halflings.
Anyway, the first one of the questions we asked are, what if there's more than one halfling in the party? Who's the lucky halfling? How do you decide?
Other than the fact that you only get one, there is no rules as written method for selecting who it is. It could be utterly random. It could be the judge's decision. You could let the players vote. If it is, for me, I would think if it's a case of an established party with a halfling and another halfling joins, it would be the original halfling that's been traveling with them because they've already been providing the luck. But there's no specific method.
Do you have a personal method that you would use, Bob, if there was more than one halfling?
I have a chaotic halfling, so I would probably just off the other halfling, and then I would still be the lucky halfling. Wilbur Whifflelinks is nutty as a fruit bat.
Nice.
I'll watch out for Wilbur. So then our next question was, can a halfling's luck score exceed their natural maximum by daily resets or adventure rewards?
By daily resets, no, because that's just healing, right? The daily resets are just taking you back up to your maximum. Through adventuring, it can, but I would urge judges to be careful on it. Not because of the concern of, okay, now this halfling has 21 points of luck he can spend during the adventure, but now this halfling has a luck of 21 and he drops it down to maybe 19 before we need to roll his body. He's almost never going to fail a luck check if he's stubborn. So if you are going to give thieves and halflings luck that could carry them above 18, I think as a judge, you also need to be mindful of the rule that playing against your alignment type can lower your. When you're starting to get up into those upper echelons, you really need to use all of those rules.
So there's an active discussion going on about this very topic over in the Goodman Games server. Shout out to Father Goose. He brought it up, saying, well, I don't think Father Goose brought it up, but somebody else said it, and Father Goose and John Wilson chimed in on it. John's take on it was, if you never lost any luck, sitting at what you rolled, and you get luck awarded for finishing an adventure, now you have a luck score higher than you rolled. There's no cap by raw. The judge can set one. He has a natural limit of 18 on all his scores. But magic and weirdness can take that score above temporarily or permanently. So there's kind of two ways to look at it. You can look like luck is fluctuating, and then whatever number you have, that's your natural maximum. The way I tend to look at it is whatever the natural maximum is what is crafted upon character generation. And then your luck can go up or down from that, but couldn't exceed it. Unless there's, magic or deities, or patrons involved, something like that.
Actually, you bring up something that I think could be really good at least as a house rule. Because, like, for example, if you've got a lucky weapon, right, your modifier doesn't change no matter if your luck does or not. So perhaps a good house rule is, if you're a halfling and you start with 15 luck, that's your natural maximum. You will never recover past that. However, you can still go above it through adventure gains or gifts from the gods, but if you spend back under that, you're not going to get it back. It'd almost be sort of like a long-term fleeting luck, right? It's not so quickly fleeting. That might be an interesting way to house rule it.
One way I've done it is I've gone, okay, you thief or halfling, you're getting luck as a reward. Everyone's getting luck as a reward for putting the bones of the sailor to rest. But you're just gonna heal your luck faster because you spent 6 points during this adventure. Everyone was getting 1. You're just gonna heal it a little bit faster unless you fail me a luck check. If you make a luck check right now, if you succeed, you were lucky enough already. You don't need that extra point. If you fail it, then it's you need to be luckier.
It kind of goes
Complicated
like
thought, but
That's an interesting house rule.
it's kind of like the Troika abilities, where when you play a game of Troika and you go to advance your skill level, you have to fail it because I think that's the way it goes. I haven't played too much Troika.
Because the higher your skill level, the harder it is.
Right, the harder it is. Yeah, that's the thought behind
I mean,
it.
there's plenty of ways to house rule it, but technically speaking, in Raw, there is no upper cap, right? And thanks to MCC, we have the ability modifiers, far up to like 25, I think. So you could certainly do things in that fashion, but if you're offering people that opportunity, you really need to pay attention to the other rules that reduce luck.
Is there a natural maximum in Raw, Bob? And if so, what is that?
There really isn't. I mean, there's a natural starting maximum in that you can't have more than an 18 to begin with. But within Raw, there technically is no maximum luck you can have,
or any score really.
Yeah. I have to disagree with that, because if you look at the halfling and the thieves under the luck, it says they're able to regenerate up to their natural maximum.
Well, and that's why you had brought up that you allow them to regenerate back to that amount, but they can still go above it, because they in the luck section they talk about the fact that you can increase your luck. And so if you've never spent if you haven't spent any luck, and according to the book you should probably get at least 1 luck per adventure. If you go through an adventure and don't spend any luck, your luck should go up by 1. That's just the way it is meant to work. So whether or not you consider it the natural maximum, and that is not as clearly delineated. You could fight, I think, either side of that.
You can have your natural maximum. I'll have a supernatural maximum, and I'll win against you.
There you go. I like that supernatural maximum. I tell you, every time I play a character, if I lose 1 point of any ability, I never change my starting, because I always want to try and fight to get that 1 point back. I'm like,
restore vitality.
Yeah.
Do it.
All right.
Players love that spell when they went to the Purple Planet and found did a little adventure, found a sweet robotic hand, chopped one guy's arm off, tried out the robotic hand, found out it was an ability that would be better suited for someone else, chopped off that guy's hand, put the robotic hand on the other guy, restore vitality, heal that one hand back. It was a ridiculous night.
Things like that are why I like the old AD&D System Shock or die rules, but
it was pretty silly.
Well, what is our next question, Stefan? You were asking these, right? Was I asking?
I was. No, I was getting these. So our next one is, when burning luck to increase another player's dice roll, does that player receive 2 points for every 1 point spent? An obvious one. We all answered it really quick then, but some people get confused, so we asked it.
And we could have new players, that are just watching this show for the first time. So it's good to touch on, beginning questions.
And honestly, I think having played dwarves and halflings primarily in DCC, halflings don't really keep up with the rest of the party at higher levels. So I know a number of people that have house ruled. Once they get to level X, their luck spend goes to 3 to 1, and to increase, because and even so, I mean, they're not keeping up with like a D7 mighty deed, but they continue to be more useful. They continue to be able to do more. But rules as written, it's twofold.
That's interesting. I hadn't even thought about that. What do
That's
we
a
got
good
next?
quest for reward too.
Mm-hmm.
It is our next one is the natural 16 and automatic hit for a dual wielding halfling, regardless of the enemy's armor class.
So before I give my answer, there's something that I came across in here that is something that needs to be entered into the Stomp the Typo, and I'm leaving it for you guys because you guys should get the credit because you're the reason why I was looking this up. So if you look at the halfling dual wielding rule, one of the things it says is if a halfling has an agility greater than 16, then they use the standard 2-weapon fighting rules. However, if a halfling uses the standard 2-weapon fighting rules for agilities 16 and 17, they are worse off than they would be if they had an agility of 15. That should be greater than 17. So I'm leaving that to you because you should get the credit because I looked it up. But yes,
Matt, you got to do it because you were doing the real research.
I will send it in.
Yeah, Raw should get the credit for that. But yes, they get an automatic hit on a 16. They are the only ones that do are halflings and dual wield.
Okay.
There you have it. And did we get to that last question, Stefan?
Yes, we did, and we weren't sure. I'd never thought of it before.
Oh, this is the one I was waiting for.
Yeah, it was, does a halfling that is dual wielding 2 weapons roll a d16 for initiative?
No. D16 is rolled for initiative if you're using a 2-handed weapon, not if you are fighting 2-handed. Those are different. If you're familiar with fighting Florentine or Rapier and Cloak, you know that fighting with 2 weapons does not slow you down like running around with a Zweihander. Big weapon, slow, multiple small weapons, fast.
We also found, I think it's another Stomp the Typo thing, but the table 4-3, the 2-weapon attack table, it says fighting 2-handed in there.
Yes,
for like the whole table.
But it doesn't say fighting with a 2-handed weapon. You are fighting with 2 hands. This is 2-handed fighting.
Yeah,
as opposed
like it works. It's just the verbiage the verbiage seems unclear.
The verbiage is a little strange because it can mean either, so you need to take it in context, but it does not specifically state 2-handed weapon, and that is what all of the initiative rules say is when using a 2-handed weapon.
Oh, Bob's gotten me again, Stefan. Now that I'm going back and looking at the equipment chart, underneath there it says 2-handed weapon. Characters using 2-handed weapons use a D16. And so, at page 95, it says 2-weapon fighting. Character fighting 2-handed cannot use a shield, obviously. That 2-handed weapon is missing. That one-word weapon is missing. So I'm going to have to change my answer again. I will eat the crow.
Don't need a whole conspiracy of them.
Halflings roll a d20. All right, let's get your final answers on these questions there, Bob. What if there are more than one halfling in the party? Who's the lucky halfling, and how do you decide? What's your answers? Rules as written.
Well, rules as written, it is wholly up to the judge how it's going to be determined. The judge can let the party pick. They can let the halflings fight it out in the Thunderdome, or any method they would like. There is no wrong answer other than allowing the elf to be the lucky halfling.
All right. Can a halfling's luck score exceed their natural maximum by daily resets or adventure rewards?
By daily resets, no. But I would argue their natural maximum can be increased through rewards from deities and adventures. But that's a vague point. So the idea that their natural maximum doesn't go up and they can only recover up to that number, I think, is equally valid.
All right. And when burning luck to increase another player's dice roll, does that player receive 2 points for every 1 point the halfling spends?
Yes, although I would clarify that it's not the die roll, it's the roll in general. Because otherwise we open up the madness of, well, I'm increasing their deed die by 2. No, you're increasing their to hit roll.
That'll be a different episode. Is a natural 16 an automatic hit for a dual-wielding halfling class, regardless of the enemy's AC?
It is, and it is only the case for halflings.
All right. And lastly, does a halfling that is dual-wielding 2 weapons roll a d16 for initiative?
No, they roll a d20.
All right. Well, we have prepared some new questions for you, Bob. One specifically for you. And Elena, if you could bring up handout or question 1 for episode 12. Could a dual-wielding thief perform a double backstab? Meaning, would they get the backstab bonus on 2 attacks?
So I find this question really interesting because it is not really something that is well covered in Raw. However, the thief's backstab ability states that you need to meet one of 2 conditions. They either need to be unaware of you, or you need to be behind them. So a dual wielding thief could meet the requirement of attacking from behind someone. Having 2 attacks doesn't mean your attacks take any longer than a single round. So I would argue that yes, a thief could, in theory, score 2 backstabs. I mean, it's sort of the classic example, right? I walk up behind the guy, I've got 2 daggers on my hand, I'm driving them into his back.
That's what I'm thinking too.
I would certainly make sure that the thief player is describing to me how they're doing it, as opposed to, well, I'm gonna stab him, then I'm gonna stab him again. No, that doesn't work out. But if they can kind of give me the justification for it, it's all happening within the same amount of time that the person would be reacting to one attack. So I would say that yes, they could, and that really increases the scare factor for thieves at higher levels who kind of need I think a little bit more scare level.
Well, let's bring up handout 1A if we could, Elena. This is exactly what Bob was referring to. On page 34, it says, when attacking a target from behind or when the target is otherwise unaware, the thief receives the indicated attack bonus to their attack roll. And then if we could bring up handout 1B, on page 36, I'll take a look at the action dice because we need to define, because it's going to be 2 separate rolls. It's 2 separate rolls for the attack. So I know there's going to be some argument, well, you can only use that backstab bonus for 1 attack roll. The action die, a thief uses their action die for any normal activity, including attacks and skill checks. Page 27, it says the action dies are used to make attacks, cast spells, and use skills. As characters advance in level, they may gain additional action dice. And then on page 66, a skill check is made by rolling a dice. If the skill is trained, the character rolls 1d20 for the check. So even though it's 2 rolls, I would agree that they would be able to use that backstab bonus twice. What do you think, Stefan?
I agree, and theoretically, I don't even think they need to be on the same target. If you have 2 guards standing right next to each other, doorway, backstab each one of them, dagger in each one's back.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where this is an action that is not specifically disallowed in the rules, right? It's not mentioned, it's not disallowed, but so we have to kind of look at the thematic basis from Appendix N. And I mean, but thieves don't get their second action till what, like 5th level?
5th level.
So
Yeah.
I mean, by that point, unless they even with the serious magic weapon, they're not keeping up in combat. They can burn luck for damage, but that's only going to take them so far. So they really do need to rely on stealth and these other abilities, and that certainly plays into it.
What
Also,
if they have a high agility, though, and they're dual wielding? So
well, I mean,
at first level, you got an agility 16, 17, 18. You're swinging 2 daggers around. Would you give them the double backstab score on each of those attacks?
if they can dual wield, they're already taking a penalty for dual wielding. So I would say yes, they're not getting an instant hit that's going to automatically penetrate the armor. So I mean, they roll a 16 on those dice, and their bonus is like +2 or +3, and the AC is 20. Doesn't matter. They're not going to succeed with the backstab. So at lower levels, I think that sort of shakes itself out a bit. And I mean, keep in mind, it doesn't matter how many actions you have. A round is just 10 seconds. It's all happening in that span. And while 10 seconds it's a good amount of time when you're in the midst of whirling, wheeling, and dealing with combat. 10 seconds is not a lot of time.
That's going to bring up a little conflict for the two weapon fighting rules that state you can't get a critical hit, and the backstab rules that say if you score a hit, it is a critical hit.
Right,
So
but that I don't think that's a conflict so much as with the two-handed fighting rules, you are not rolling a crit. It doesn't matter what you're rolling, you're not getting a six. Your 16 is not a critical hit. A backstab is something additional, right? I mean, a thief in theory can succeed on a backstab of 12 and get a critical success. It's less about getting the maximum number and that ability surpassing the armor class.
Yeah, we already covered that anyway, Matt. Bob
so
talked about that already, and we did a whole episode on Thieves. We've already sussed that one out.
he did, and I just need a refresher as I'm looking at the rule. So let's say we have a thief with a 16 agility, level 1, primary hand scores a critical on a max die roll, which would be a 20. But it says 16 on a 1d16 that also beats the target's AC. No automatic hit. So if
Right,
you got,
but if he was backstabbing, and he's beat the AC, that it's the backstab ability that's giving the critical hit, not the rolling of the 16. Now, what gets
so
really interesting is the first roll's a natural 20. It's already a crit. How do you want to handle a critical success on a backstab that gives a crit?
So let's say the thief is rolling a d16 with their offhand dagger. He's got an agility of 12. Can't score a critical hit fighting two-handed. But with the backstab ability, if he beats the AC, it's a successful backstab, and a successful backstab is a critical hit.
Right, but a backstab is. But again, if I'm a thief not backstabbing, and rolling a d20, I can't score a critical success no matter what I roll unless it's a 20, right? So I could roll an 18 and it's not a crit. It's the backstab that makes it a crit. Backstab overrules the other.
In the hierarchy of
The
rules, it is
exception.
above.
It
Well,
is
and
the
that's
exception.
what I was wondering, is if the backstab rule would overrule the other rule. So yeah.
Now, I'm sure I'm going to get hate email from people that are going to say, "No, a thief should only be able to backstab once in a round." And it's one of those things where it's not specifically prohibited. It is also not specifically referenced. So, technically speaking, I think it's up to the judge, but I would certainly know.
Oh, I think we lost your audio there, Bob.
Oh, sorry.
I heard him the whole time. So.
Oh, did you?
Yeah.
I would certainly allow it. It's not forbidden or granted by the rules. I would allow it. It's certainly in keeping with theme.
I did have another handout 1D, that kind of references the haste spell, because then I was thinking, I agree with your assessment on that. They would get 2 backstabs, and then I'm like, what if they got a haste spell and they get like 3 or 4 actions? And then, I'm seeing the imagery in my head of the little thief coming up and just going, as fast as they can. And I'd be like, yeah, if they described it like that, I'd totally allow that.
Yeah, it's again, now rather than getting 2 actions, they're getting 4 in the same amount of time. Now they're starting to blur, right? I mean,
Yeah.
now we're talking like Bruce Lee with nunchuck speed. We're talking insane, and but again, they still have to meet those qualifications. If they're running up on someone and they want to shank them prison style in the belly, if they know they're coming, that's not a backstab. It's not going to work. You're just going to try and hit them 4 times.
We do have one of our favorite handouts from JG. Elena, if you could bring up handout 1F, please. He's representing or discussing the Forgotten class. They were talking about the Thief back in 2011 and how the Thief kind of seemed underrepresented, and everyone threw a bunch of ideas out. And he said, Joseph says, you're right, the alignment influences Thief's skills abilities. It's in the build, so to speak. And then underneath that, in the DCC RPG, a Thief's backstab causes an automatic critical. So as soon as they hit successfully with that backstab, automatic crit. But I did want to take a moment as I read these forums more to just applaud Joseph and all the creators of DCC RPG way back in 2011, because there was a lot of conflict and pushback. Like, it was different rules, it was a different system, and there was a lot of posts that are just like, "Yo, you can't do that. No, we don't want that, and that sucks." And I just want to thank everyone who created it for pushing forward and creating this writing.
And what I greatly enjoy looking back through those forums is there's some people that were really vehement about what they didn't like, and you know what I don't see in the community? Most of those people, and
Yep.
the ones that I do have completely come around.
Well, we've got one more question for you, Bob, before we end for tonight. Are there any rules for assisting others in ability checks?
You know, I was so sure there was. I looked and there aren't, and it makes sense that there aren't when you put it into the perspective of getting like a +1 bonus to a skill check requires a successful bless. Right? It takes an act of God to be able to do that. So unless a specific adventure, says two people can work in tandem to do this or something like that, there are no rules for assisting one another, and it's just not a thing.
Do you have any home rules that you use specifically?
Um, it really varies. Um, there's precedent for with like wizards doing ritual casting for each additional wizard. It ups the spell check by 1. So there have been times where I've allowed someone like, well, we're trying to haul something up. Okay, well, whoever's got the greatest strength modifier is your primary, and then I'll let you add, 2 other people can help, and you can add their strength modifiers. That way you don't get the guy with 0 getting a +3. The guy with 0 really isn't helping. And I've done things like that, but overall it's generally kind of all or nothing.
I I did find 2 cases, well, kind of one case and then one caveat. Elaine, if you could bring up handout 2A on page 412 in the fire elemental description, and it talks about if the fire elemental hits you and you're on fire. It's a reflex save, DC 16, +4 if the character stop drops and rolls, and +2 if they're aided by allies to help put the flames out. So that's the only instance I found of an aided check in the
Yeah, and
entire
that's
book.
and that's a reflex save.
Right.
A save as opposed to an ability check.
But our handout 2B, and Stefan, we should really show this every time before the show.
We
Uh,
should.
Page 447 talks about rules complexity. That said, judges may wish to expand on the game. You know, it talks about the rules. Here it is. The rule set deliberately omits many modern concepts in order to speed gameplay. Variety of players suggested varying rules for further defining areas of play. These suggestions were discarded. They increase complexity. So keep your games simple, keep your games fun, and read that reference.
There's
Go ahead,
there's a great example that just came up in the past couple of days as we were doing some editing for Dark Tower. There is a magical item. It's a ring of speed, and the way the ring of speed works is for every round you are using it, when you are done, you lose that many points of stamina. If you run out of stamina, turn to dust. And so the question is, okay, but it starts on an NPC. So we'll put a limit in there on how long he can use it. But how do we handle his loss of stamina? And I pointed out we were going back and forth on if we really needed to describe additional results from that, or if we needed to change the way it worked. And I pointed out Ray of Enfeeblement, really, as written, is only effective against characters, because we don't describe the strength of monsters. So a monster losing 2 points of strength, what does that mean? The judge has to figure it out. It's vague. And so yeah, there are vagaries in there that judges get to play with.
Stefan, what are your thoughts? How do you do assisted checks?
It is varied. I've gone, what's your modifier? Well, or yeah, everyone helping adds +1. I've done okay. Um, let's use the dice chain. But usually, what I just do is okay, 3 people can fit at this door that you guys are trying to break down. Just each of you roll a d20, and whoever's highest, like you're the one that did it.
Yeah, that's usually how I do it too. Lane, if you could bring up handout 2C, I've got some common ways that I've seen it done. Number one is add the assisting PC's strength modifier to the active PC's rolls. I've seen that. Number two, have each PC that's assisting roll and take the best roll out of all those and combine it with the other strength modifiers from the other PCs. That way everybody gets to roll, because who doesn't like rolling dice? Um, Three is reduce the DC by 1 or 2 for every PC that is assisting. That's kind of the same as giving them a +1 bonus or a +2 bonus for every person that's assisting. And then the other way was increase the roll on the dice chain per X amount of characters assisting. So if you have 2 characters assisting, you roll on a D24. If you got 5 characters assisting, then you get to roll on a D30.
Also, I think there's something to be said for sometimes if a bunch of people are going to do it together, you don't need a roll. If a party of 4
Yeah.
people are trying to topple a 30-foot tall stone pillar, there's going to be a roll involved. But if it's something that's fairly simple, that's got a DC of like say 10, 3 people can work together on it, they should just be able to succeed. It's easy to begin with. So
Yeah, if there's not a real threat of failure or something that doesn't happen bad because of failure, you can just try again, until you're tired or it works. Just let it happen.
because the roles are meant to represent when there is really a chance of failure. If it looks like they can just do it, they can just do it.
I did find one instance that I hadn't seen that I thought was pretty innovative here. Elaine, if you could bring up handout 2D. Vanguard, back in 2012, says he makes the primary person who's trying the action roll the d20, and anyone supporting roll a d20. And 1, it's a -2 to the check. They totally fumbled the guy messing with the door or whatever. If it's a 5, +1 to check. If they get to 10, +2, 15, +3. And if they roll a 20, then whoever's rolling that gets a +4. I thought that was nice.
I think it's an interesting way to do it. I think it might be too big of a bonus, though. I mean, when you again, you have been blessed by my God, +1. I have another wizard helping me cast this same spell, +1. So while there's nothing set in stone, and judges are certainly welcome to do it any way they would like. And as a game designer, if I want it to work another way in an adventure, I'm just going to write it that way. But overall, it shouldn't be a gigantic bonus.
I did find one more. Elena, if you could bring out handout 2E, and this is one that I didn't like. Hopefully, Gnome Boy doesn't watch this and send me hate mail. He said, if the DC is like 20 and somebody comes up and helps, cut the DC in half. So each of them have to beat a 10. And I was like, oh, that sounds way too easy. And
I agree that might be too easy, especially considering what a DC 20 is meant to represent. Although at higher levels, you really need much higher DCs. But I could see having both of them roll and giving them a reduced target, just not that far reduced. If you want to do multiple rolls like that. But other than that, I mean, without bringing up without using the concept of let's take 20. Generally, if the players have enough time, they're not in a hurry. They can accomplish whatever they want. Yeah. It's just like during one of my playtests last week. As well, we need to get through this door. Patang, patang, patang. Ha! We have smashed down the door. Yes, and what is behind the door is waiting for you, and you've drawn a wandering encounter. So life is really going to be bad for you. just keep in mind that a dungeon's a living environment. Actions have consequences.
That's a great point for anybody out there judging, though. If there's no chance for failure, if there's no consequence for failure, then should there be a roll? Make sure you guys keep that in mind. But the time has come for us to get our final answers on these questions. Could a dual-wielding thief perform a double backstab? I am going to say yes. They would get that backstab bonus on both attacks. Stefan, what do you think?
Yes, for me.
And Bob, you get the final answer.
It is not forbidden in the rules. It takes place in the same amount of time. I would definitely allow it.
Well, the thieves just got a little bit scarier, everyone.
They need it.
And then our last question is, are there any rules for assisting others in ability checks in the DCC RPG? What's your answer to that one, Stefan?
There are not. People assisting can just also roll, and you should accept the highest roll as, the best attempt by all the people involved.
My answer, rules is written, no, there is no rules for assisting, so you got to create your own. That falls under that page 447 rule of being omitted. Bob, what's your final answer on that one?
There's periodic rolls for assisting in spell checks and saving throws, but not for ability checks.
All right, well, that comes to the end of our show. Bob, you got anything coming up you want to share with us?
We did just interview Michael Moorcock. that was a BFD. That was a lot of fun, and so that podcast episode has been released. Night of the Bog Beast, which is DCC RPG Horror number 8, is gone from pre-order. I think it's going to be arriving in stores soon. That's by what used to be called the Halloween Adventure, and I'm excited about that. Yeah. And then I'm working on Caverns of Thracia for DCC as announced at the end of Dark Tower, and we're still tossing around all sorts of other little things. So I've got stuff in the works that I can't talk about, and those are things that I can.
Nice. Stefan, what about you?
Running a couple games on the Dungeon Crawler Discord server this weekend. I need some more players on Sunday if people want to be in like a Winnie the Pooh themed adventure, because that's all public domain now. You can do whatever you want with it. And I'm looking forward to LongCon. I spent like 6 hours sewing all the patches onto my jacket that I've collected over the years.
Nice.
Oh yeah, I'm going to be at Game Hall.
Outstanding. Bob, I'm going to post on Facebook later today. I found a huge, gorgeous Appendix N collection at Half Price Books this weekend. I missed the Moorcock episode. I had to watch it on Rewind because I was up at a Halloween party and my son's in Fort Worth. But I happened to go into Half Price Books and there was 3 boxes of them.
Oh.
And,
I saw the pictures. I was jealous. I wish I was there.
Well, they were in gorgeous condition.
Well, anybody that's coming to Gamehole Con, the Goodman booth will have Appendix N books at the booth.
Lastly, I think there might be like 1 or 2 hours left on Marzio's Kickstarter. If you guys haven't checked that out, make sure you head over there. And then James Ponzel has got a new Kickstarter up called Ponzanel, called Cats of Rathulu, I believe. Mm-hmm. And he's the creator from one of my favorite adventures, House of the Red Doors.
Yeah.
So if you guys haven't seen that yet, make sure you check it out.
I haven't seen that. I'm going to look for it.
Thanks for joining us, Bob. Thank you for being another awesome guest. Mm-hmm. In 2 weeks' time, on October 25th, we will be joined by Stefan Poag. See, how do I say that one?
Poag?
Poag or Poag?
I think it's Poag, but I'm not an expert on it.
Don't get fancy. We'll let him figure it out.
All right. Anyway, we will be joined by the amazing artist Stefan Poag. We'll get clarification on how to pronounce his last name when he's here, so make sure you guys tune in for that. Thanks, everybody, and have a good night.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.